have wonderful lineup of panelists for you today. I'm really excited that you're all here to join us. This panel has been months in the making, so I'm glad that you have all shown interest in addressing this issue that we've been seeing in our community. The Asian American Federation started to focus on this issue of bullying last year when we came out with our children's report that showed that suicide has become a serious problem among Asian American youth. And that, in combination with another report by All Deaf and See Coalition, that Asian youth have actually reported a substantial increase in bullying, 20% in the last 4 years, made us think that this is something that we really need to start addressing in the community. So in addition to obviously the Federation's interest in this issue, is something that's really also personally important to me. Growing up, my brother was bullied in middle school and high school, and he didn't really have the resources to figure out what is it that I'm going through, what is bias-based harassment. So my parents and I, we just kind of swept it under the rug, and I really watched him struggle for a number of years, trying to figure out, is it my fault? And it really did affect so many areas of his life, his academics, his social development. So this is something that's very close to my heart, and I really do think that if he had had the resources and even the language to talk about what he had experienced, he wouldn't have had to struggle on his own during the most formative adolescent years in his life. So I'm hoping too that we provide really important resources for youth that you work with, whether as nonprofit leaders or program managers, or even just maybe perhaps your teachers or just community members or parents, that you think this is an important conversation to have. So I am kind of curious for my own interest, how many of you, raise your hand if you yourself have been bullied, or you know of someone who has been bullied. So if you kind of just take a look around the room, that's at least half the room. So that actually fits in with the statistics that have come out saying that 50% of Asian American youth have experienced bullying. And if not 50%, then bystanders, people have actually witnessed other friends and kids of their same ethnic background being bullied, 75% or something pretty high like that. So again, thank you for joining us. I do want to take a minute to introduce our board member, Stella Quino. She's the director of New York Actuarial Evaluation at Empire Blue Cross Blue Shield. She's been very supportive of the work that we do with youth and mental health. So she's going to formally introduce the panel. So thank you so much for coming out.
Welcome everyone. As you said, my name is Stella Aquino, and I'm a new board member of the Asian American Federation. I also represent Empire Blue Cross Blue Shield, a longtime corporate supporter of the Asian American Federation. And I'd like to thank you all for joining us tonight to take part in this very important discussion on the bullying of Asian American youth and its impact on mental health. So as you had said, we have an outstanding panel who are here to help us understand why bullying occurs among Asian American youth, what some mental health effects might be, and how we can collaborate together to address this issue. And we would like to thank them for taking time out of their busy schedules to share their expertise with the community. And we would also like to thank you, as you had said, for being here tonight. I know you have your own concerns about bullying, and we're hoping that we can work together to address this issue. Let me just share with you some surprising statistics that American Federation had gathered. First, in 2009, a study by the U.S. Justice and Education Department shows that about 54% of Asian American youth within the ages of 12 and 18 experience bullying, compared with 38% of Black teens, and also compared with 34% of Hispanic teens and 31% of white teens. In the same survey, 62% of Asian American youth reported being cyberbullied, compared with 18% of white teens. More recently, a 2013 study by the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund showed that 50% of Asian American children in New York City reported being bullied, which is a staggering 20% compared with 2009. So far from being harmless, bullying has an alarming impact on mental health, not only on the short term, but also on the long term, like on our relationships, careers, and even life expectancy. So we're gathered here tonight to address this issue and hoping we can also address the persistent problem of stereotypes that occur among Asian American youth that often lead to bullying within schools, so we can provide our youth with necessary resources so that they can overcome the results of growing up Asian in America. We had hoped to share with you a message from Congressman Mike Honda, who is the founder and chair of the Congressional Anti-Bullying Caucus. However, he has been sick all week, so was unable to record a video for us. But he had expressed his support to all our efforts in increasing awareness of the bullying in Asian American community. At this point, we would also like to thank our corporate sponsors, Empire Blue Cross Blue Shield and W.K. Kellogg Foundation, who has been instrumental in making this event possible. We would also like to thank our event partners, the Charles B. Wang Community Health Center, and The Door, and Mount Sinai Adolescent Health Center, and also the Seed Coalition for joining us to help increase awareness of the bullying issue in the Asian community. And now, I would like to introduce our moderator for tonight, Arthur Chen from Fox 5 New York, who is a three-time Emmy Award-winning newscaster who reports on everything from feature to political stories and breaking news coverage, including Ebola outbreak and the Charlie Hebdo terrorism case. He attended Columbia University and started his journalism career at NBC News. So let's welcome Arthur.
Just to give you an idea, first of all, it's an honor for me to be here today. And to give you an idea of the format of this, what we'll do is we have 4 very dynamic speakers who have very different perspectives and expertise to share with us. So how we'll do it is we'll introduce each one so you know what they're about. They will give a short presentation, and then at the end of it, we'll round it out with some questions. Anybody who has any questions here, please, if there are any questions as they're speaking, write it down, whatever, and we'll try to get to as many of them as we can. And hopefully be able to also provide some contact information, whether it's through social media or anything, so that if you want to contact these guys outside of this arena, that can be done. Having said that, our first speaker is Wei Chen. He's a youth organizer with Asian Americans United. He was one of the leaders at South Philadelphia High School in their student organization, and his work in the anti-bias and racial healing arena during that struggle and since then has been nationally recognized. As a 17-year-old student, he helped with the he helped his high school, South Philadelphia High, establish Chinese Student Association, and that eventually led to major boycott of the school for more than 8 days following persistent anti-Asian and anti-immigrant harassment. He now works at Asian Americans United as a youth organizer and a civic engagement coordinator. He serves on the board of Victim Witness Services of South Philadelphia and was one of 10 people nationally awarded a Peace First Prize fellowship to continue his organizing work in peace studies and addressing bias harassment. And just in February this year, he was appointed by the mayor of Philadelphia, and it's a tremendous honor to serve as a commissioner on the Philadelphia Commission on Human Rights. So his bio is almost as long as mine, and he's a lot younger. Basically, that's all you need to know.
So again, my name is Wei Chen, and I'm from Asian American United, youth organizer and civic engagement coordinator. And the title, yes. So I came to this country when I was 17 or 16, between 16 and 17. Yes. So my first, school, my first school experience was, I got 2 punches from the behind when I going to get the stuff from the locker. And that was really sad moment for me. As a new immigrant, came to this country, did not speak any English. And everything was new for me. Environment, culture, language, food, everything, even though the air. And after I got punched, I got beat up. No one came to me. No one came to me say, "Are you okay? Are you fine?" Even there's no place for me to report the incident. Southern High School, 20% of the population are Asian American, and majority are African American. When I got beat up, and my first came to my mind was, I hate this student. I hate why you do this to me. But I did not think a lot about why this happened and how long that happened to me, happened to the school. As soon as I find out I'm not the only victims, and there were many students like me who were beat up. But that was terrible for me as a new immigrant student. I did not go to school for 7 days because the school wasn't safe. I did not talk to my parents because I don't want them to feel bad. I was surround around school and my house for 7 days, and no one knows this. No one knows this. I've been really struggled. I was thinking about why this happened to my life. Right? Because come this country wasn't my choice. And everything just bad to me. Everything. And I would even think about to commit suicide. Until one day that I met someone, they said it to me about his experience when he was a youth. When he was a student in the public school, he fight back. Guess what? He fight back with violence. And what he told me was, how can we survive and how can we change the society? So after I going back to school, I started to organize a Chinese student in the school because I wasn't ability to speak English. I organized Chinese students to talk to principal and school administrator and school district people. And then we start doing things with the principal, but there wasn't a lot of feedback from them. It wasn't a lot of change, even when we talked to them. 2009, 26 Asian students were beat up in one day, and 13 of them sent hospital for medical treatments. Can you believe that? And then I feel more terrible because I've been doing this work. I've been trying myself, trying to change environment. I feel confident to doing that. I feel, if I take this action, the environment would change, but it did not. It even get more terrible. I feel really bad. I get sick in my mentors. But the thing is, there wasn't anyone that I can talk to. And the school still. So we start our boycott. I working with a Vietnamese student in the school, and we start launch a boycott. And we didn't go to school. We meet outside of the school. We start to share about our story. We share our story as an Asian immigrant in the school. We share our story as a Chinese American, Vietnamese American in the school. And every single one get bullied. And every single one get harassment. Every single one was a victim of violence. And a lot of them, because they talked to their parents, and their parents let them quit school because school wasn't safe. It wasn't a right place to go. During the boycott, we not just share about who we are. It's an opportunity to express ourselves and not keep those heavy things on our mind. And we find out we're not the only one. And we're not the first one. And then we start doing press conference. I start push myself to do a press conference. I start to organize students to march. I start working with a community to remind them of a voice as an Asian American. And then I start to, after boycott, we file a lawsuit with the Department of Justice, of course, with the help from the LDF. We file a lawsuit with the Department of Justice and Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission. And then we win the lawsuit. And then we force the school district to sign a settlement agreement with us. But the big victory was that young people remind themselves, and young people knowing that we as immigrants and we as Asian, that we have a power to make change. And also win the victory of strong community leader like me. I'm not strong, but yes. But like me, and we're working with a community elderly, and we're working with the young people. We do organizing. We're helping them because when we were victims, when we were with the student in the school, there were no one that we can turn to. And many people think about that is school violence is a problem between one kid and the other kids, well, Asian and the black community. But it was wrong in Southfield High School case. Guess what? It's a problem about adult responsibility in the school. It's about adults did not play the right role model in the school. When we get bullied, when we reporting to the school, they did not do anything. When we turn our help eyes to them, they turn their head away. They did not play the right role. How can we educate our kids in the school to be a successful model? Right. During the boycott, we are working with other black community youth group, and then we learned that Asian immigrant in the South High School, in the school district, wasn't the only victims. There were a lot of problems in the school district. There were a lot of problems. This is challenging not just about that we challenge the school district. This is a challenge that we challenge the society and the culture in the school district, that not being taken responsible for the young people. So my suggestion here today is sometimes we should think about our kids, not kids, but we should think about those younger generation, how they feel in a school. It's not just about how successful of their academic, 100 A+. It's about how they feel and comfortable in the school. As an Asian American, yes.
For that way, I'm sorry about what you went through, but thank you so much for being candid and sharing that experience so we can understand it better. Our next speaker is sitting next to Wei, is Harjot Kaur. She manages the community development program for the Sikh Coalition, which she joined back in January of 2013. She started as a community development fellow, and then she continued to work there and expand her role there, including the Sikh Coalition's Youth Leadership Development Program, which is called the Junior Sikh Coalition. You guys didn't work too hard on that name, huh? She is further developing the program in its two current campaigns, Know Your Rights on Bullying and Nervao, and she's going to correct my pronunciation about that shortly, Without Fear and Without Hate, Poetry and Art. Harjot survives to empower and strengthen both the New York City and national Sikh communities through education and social justice advocacy training. Previously, she worked as a research study assistant at Memorial Sloan Kettering's Cancer Center and helped manage clinical trials for the neurology service there. She also conducted research for Johns Hopkins for a program evaluation study on New Jersey's state home visiting program. She graduated with honors from Fordham University with a Bachelor's of Science in Psychology and Anthropology, as well as a minor in Arabic, basically an Asian parent's dream.
I want to say thank you to everyone who's come out tonight. It's always nice to see people in the community travel to their boroughs and make their way to these events. To the panelists and definitely to the organizers. So thank you to everyone. Thank you for the introduction. And yes, the pronunciation was correct. It was nerpo nerver, which means in our scriptures, without fear and without hate. So I want to say thank you to Wei. We, in our youth program as well, we continue to always periodically encourage the students to talk about their bullying experiences, whether it's about their own, whether it's about their families and their friends. And like Wei, a lot of them are very difficult and extremely impactful and often very scarring. So I also want to share a story to kind of explain why the Sick Coalition does the work that we do and why we really try to get our community involved so heavily. So back in 2007 or 8 it was, there was a student at a high school in Richmond Hill that has a very high concentration of Sikhs. In our religion, we do not cut we're not supposed to be cutting our hair, and the boys who do not cut their hair, they keep it wrapped up around their head. And he did as well. He followed his faith. For a long time, he was being bullied. He was being called names, verbal, physical, all of it. And then it came to a point where one of the students who had been attacking him quite regularly was suspended. When he came back at a retaliation, he took keys in between his knuckles, started physically assaulting him very badly to the point where there's numerous fractures around his head, his orbital bones, around his body, bruising, all of it. And of course, he was taken to the hospital and whatnot. And after that, what we realized was, upon further investigation, that the school had not been doing anything throughout this entire period. It had been made aware to the administration before, similarly, and even at that point, they still did not take appropriate action. A lawsuit was filed. Following this incident, and there were more around this time, but especially since then, many more incidents have surfaced. And within our own group, we still have kids, and these are kids who join every year, who bring new stories to the table, and that means that our work, as much as we're doing, is still not nearly there. But with this story, what the story really shows is a few things. It sheds lights on 3 huge areas of focus that we really need to improve on. One is language barriers. What happened here was that the child himself, he had only immigrated there, I think, a year or 2 before that. So he definitely did not have the communication means, and nor did his parents when his parents were trying to speak to the school. They would call, and this is also not very typical. A lot of times our parents don't know of the situation, or they kind of turn the other cheek to it. Not because they mean to, not that they want to, but that's just what the consequences or what the conditions kind of allow. Another thing I want to shed light on is the school administration, so accountability, appropriate action. A lot of times what happens is that the appropriate preventative measures are not put in place. And in this story, it was that the student was suspended, and he came back, and it didn't mean that the sick student was protected, though. He was still not safe. So even by suspension, it really doesn't do anything. Not for the other student, not for this student. And I'll talk about that in a second, about some ways that hopefully we can try to address this, a lot of this restorative justice that a lot of organizations have thankfully been working on. And the last thing is also knowing the policies, right? So our responsibility and our activism, what we can do to get involved, to also make our own lives better and our own, our generations better. The student, of course, because he was newly immigrated, he's not going to know the bullying policy of the school, right? But these are the kind of things that as community members who do have that access, who do have the resources to find out, we should know, right? So that when our students and our families are immigrating, we can help them. Or those who already have, we can still help. So what I want to talk about a little bit, and I'm sure we're all going to be talking about resources and access and language and stuff like that, so I don't want to dwell too much on it, and hopefully give others a chance to ask more specific questions. But our community, as a micro community in this larger national population, we've all been talking about statistics. Our Asian American statistics in bullying are much higher. For 6 students, they report over 67% of them say that they've been bullied. So depending on your identity, depending on what you affiliate with, the statistics are incredible. I mean, and this is just what's reported. You know, we don't even report half the time because the resources, because we don't have the language means, because we don't know who to go to. In New York City, Respect for All is in place, but that doesn't mean it's being implemented, right? We still need translators. We still need, most of the time, school administration actually they don't hang up with posters. They don't have that go-to person that's made very available and known to the students. So with that story, I just wanted to shed some light on some of these areas, right? But I also want to turn, and only for the sake of time, I just want to turn our attention a little bit to two other areas. One is cyberbullying, and then the second will be the cycle of bullying. So what ends up happening. Cyberbullying is something that is the three traditional forms of bullying is verbal, physical, and interrelational, right? Which also means exclusion, gossip, and rumors and whatnot. The fourth one that's most recent and most detrimental is cyberbullying, and this is something that I strongly encourage that all of us learn more about. We know about Facebook, we know about Instagram, we know about some of these, more common social media platforms. We don't know about these websites and applications that are made to be anonymous. So, for example, there's a website, almost all the schools are logged in, you search for your school, and then you can post anything you want about any student. And then you post anything you want about any student, right? These are the kinds of things that parents don't know about, a lot of the students don't know about. Students don't know that they're being posted about online, whereas everyone is all of a sudden finding images of them, finding information about them, and you can imagine what that could look like, right? And then you can also imagine what that feels like for the students and what it may do. But these are the kind of things that we're not going to know about if we don't ask, whether it's to your kids, whether it's to your siblings, whether it's to your youth groups, whoever it is. We will not know if we don't ask. I'm not that much older than the kids that I work with, and I don't know. We didn't have this, or at least I didn't know that we had it. But these are really important questions. Then the last thing that I'll actually this segues into the cycle of bullying. We try, at least as from an organization's perspective, not to use the words anymore victim or as bullies, because they're more, they're hard labels, and we don't want to do that. If you do a bad action, it doesn't make you a bad person, right? So we do the same thing with bullying and whatnot. What it means is that there's a lack of education, there's a lack of awareness of whatever it may be, whether it's a religion, whether it's ethnicity, whatever. So we really need to address those roots, right? But what ends up happening is in the interim, a lot of those who are frustrated, a lot of those who are being bullied may start to bully other people. And it's a matter of power and balance, right? When someone really takes away your power, takes away your feeling of safety and comfort, you will do what you need to correct that on your own and to justify that. And so another thing that I'd also like to encourage, or at least explain, is that it's not that all of our kids and all of our sisters and brothers are actually victims of bullying. As much as we're so aware of this problem, a lot of them are actually also bullying others, and this is something that we really also need to pay attention to if we're going to try to talk to our kids about how they can start, what they need to speak about and how they need to behave, take responsibility for their actions as well, and things like that. I'll end there. Just as mentioned before, I'd really like to hear other people's questions and other panelists. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that. And I thought that's a fascinating point that you bring up, that we may know people who are victims of it. We may know just as many who are instigators of it as well. So maybe we could talk about that a little bit later afterwards. Our next speaker is Deborah Dong. She is a licensed clinical social worker practicing in the Mental Health Bridge Program at the Charles B. Wang Community Health Center. That program is based on an innovative model of integrated behavioral health, providing patients with primary care at the health center with direct access to on-location collaborative mental health services. For the past 4 years, she's been working as a bilingual and bicultural clinician, providing mental health therapy to adults, adolescents, children, and their family members who face multiple stresses in their life. I learned a new term today, stressors, as they grow up and adjust to life in the U.S. In addition to providing individual health therapy, she co-facilitates a monthly support group for parents of children with special needs. She also participates in providing clinical skills training tailored to to equip new clinicians with social work interns who are entering the mental health field. In the near future, she'll also be conducting bilingual educational workshops for the community, and it's worth mentioning now there are a couple of people up here who are bilingual, so if you want to learn more about that as well. And also, if you don't hear well in the back, please feel free to move on up, because I know that's not the strongest speaker. Okay, she won't take it personally, I promise.
So I'm going to start off also by sharing a short story. I started meeting with a 14-year-old Chinese American girl about 2 years ago, and at that time she was referred to us because her mom noticed that she was not going to school. She would stay in bed all day and sleeping for long periods of time and crying for no obvious reason. And at one point, she finally told her mom, going to school is really hard.
Can you guys hear Deborah in the back?
Hello? Hello?
Can you hear me in the back?
Hello?
Yeah.
Hello? Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. So, sorry. So she had a lot of trouble, wasn't able to go to school, and very sad and depressed. And she wasn't, she didn't tell anybody, but at one point she told her mom that going to school made me want to kill myself. And that was when mom noticed that something was wrong, and that was when she brought her in. And when I first met with her, she was very shy, very quiet, and she wasn't really able to tell me what had happened. But slowly she shared that she's a freshman in high school, and in one of her classes, a couple of kids were laughing at her whenever she would say something, and the same group of kids would also laugh at her and make little comments whenever she would walk through the hallway. So even though they never directly made any threat at her and it wasn't physical bullying, this was very emotionally stressful for her. And she kept quiet. She's always been very focused and studious, so she tried to do well at school, tried to ignore them for as long as possible. But after a while, it became too difficult to bear, and that was when she stopped going to school. And I still remember very clearly mom's reaction. She came in and she was very confused. She said, "I work really hard, long hours. I provide everything for my kids, for my family. All I ask for them to do is to focus on school. That's the only thing they need to worry about. I don't understand why she could be so depressed. If these kids are teasing her and being mean to her, why can't she just ignore them?" And this is a very typical situation that we see in our setting. The kids or the teens that come in, a lot of the Asian American teens that we work with have reported bullying at some point, and they usually describe the experience as very stressful. Everyday things like walking through the hallway at school, going to and from the bus stop, or even going to the cafeteria. These can become very scary experiences for them. They often report feeling depressed and very anxious. Sometimes they question their self-worth. They wonder, why is it happening to me? What is it that's wrong with me? Why is it that I am unlikable? So it can definitely impact their self-esteem as well. And it's not always easy for our Asian American teens to talk about their feelings. Most of us are not really used to talking about our feelings at home. In a lot of ways, mental health and emotional health, feelings, that type of topic is still a taboo subject for a lot of Asian immigrant families. So it's rare that a teen will come right out and tell his or her parents that, hey, I've been feeling depressed. This is what's going on at school, and it's really stressful for me. More often, we might notice signs like increased irritability, maybe getting upset or crying over things that are usually minor, maybe overall sense of grumpiness, not really enjoying things that they normally like to do, maybe withdrawing from friends and family. And sometimes they might stop going to school. Sometimes they might start to experience suicidal ideation. And we have parents, kind of like the mom in my story, where they are really concerned and they're really caring. They want the best for their kids, but they have limited understanding on mental and emotional health. So they might not really notice these signs until the functioning is impaired. For example, stopping, maybe they're not going to school, maybe they're not eating, maybe they're not sleeping. Maybe they're starting to talk about feeling hopeless. What's the point of living? Or maybe I'm better off dead. And that's often when the parents notice, and that's often when we get the cases. I do also want to say that although being bullied is a stressful experience for everyone, not everybody is impacted the same way. Not all teens who have been bullied will develop a mental health condition like depression, such as the girl in my story. The level of impact on mental health will depend on a couple of different factors, including the age and the stage of development, the type of bullying, the sense of self-identity, self-esteem, and very importantly, the support system. And one of the best buffers that we have observed is the support system. Having the presence of peer groups and also supportive adults in the teen's life can make a really big difference. A lot of times we can't really control or stop the non-physical bullying, such as teasing, excluding, or maybe like, laughing. But the types of bullying that are non-physical, we try to address it, but it might be really hard to stop it completely. So therefore, we try to buffer the emotional impact by building the support system. So what do we do in mental health treatment or therapy? If a teen reports to us that he or she has been bullied, we try to intervene both at the personal level and also by helping them to build the support system. On a personal level, we would provide individual therapy. We help them to process their experience and to talk about their feelings. We help them to understand that they're not alone in the situation, that there is support, and very important is that there are things that we can do to respond to or to stop the bullying. We also talk about the dynamics of bullying because those questions about, what's wrong with me? Why is it that I'm being bullied? They really impact self-esteem, and we try to go through that, help them to understand that bullying is in no way their fault. Sometimes there are things that make people more easy of targets for bullying, but that is in no way the cause for the bullying. So we try to help to decrease some of the self-blame in that way. And by building a support system, we're talking about a couple of components at the school level, in the community, and also by getting adult involvement. At school, we are looking at joining meaningful activities, joining a peer group, building social supports, kind of like what Wei just talked about. It's a perfect example of how important it is to gather together and be able to support each other at school. So maybe even identify an adult that can be trusted, someone that you can go to for support when you need to. And maybe some schools can even help with building that type of support system. And in terms of in the community, we really encourage youth to join programs. There are a lot of youth programs that have very meaningful activities, including our Teen Resource Center. We have a lot of very healthy, very positive activities that are going on. And not only will the teen be able to meet other people who have similar interests, but by doing those things that they like to do and by doing things that they feel they're good at doing, that helps to build self-identity and self-esteem. So all of those things help to buffer the emotional impact of bullying. And adult involvement is the last component I'm going to talk about. It's very important, reporting to both the school and to the parents, so that everybody can take the steps together to respond to the bullying. And this in itself is a very challenging process for our team, for me. A lot of the teens tell me they don't want to burden their parents. They work really hard. They tell them to just focus on school. And even though the parents are the ones saying that, the kids also feel that way. They don't want to bother their parents with something that is considered so small and that they can ignore. So, and they also don't want to be considered a tattletale or a snitch or be called any of those kinds of names at school as well. So a lot of times that is very challenging, helping them to get past that part. And culturally, working hard and being humble and not causing trouble, these are considered positive traits. And the idea of standing up and speaking out sometimes can be a very new idea, very scary idea, and it kind of conflicts with some of our underlying cultural values and cultural norms. So this might result in a lot of underreporting. So it takes a lot of courage to report. We also try to engage the parents by providing psychoeducation on mental health and bullying and clearing some of the misconceptions that empowers them to support their teens. Instead of telling the teen to ignore and focus on school, which kind of minimizes the problem, we encourage them to acknowledge their teen's feelings, what they're going through, and also maybe they can even go with their teen to school and to talk about what are some of the concrete options. And in addition to the concrete options, that also shows that you acknowledge the seriousness of the issue. So the teen can feel very emotionally supported if the parents respond that way. So in conclusion, I just want to say that bullying is a very stressful experience for everyone, but especially for Asian American youth, there's that additional challenge of cultural invalidation. So it's important to have access to support services and to psychoeducation. And having that strong support system can really buffer the emotional impact of bullying.
Thank you, Deborah. Maybe later on we can focus on some of this whole thing about how parents react to it, because it looks like we're talking about three things, right? How the schools and the adults handle this, how the fellow students do, and how things happen at home. Maybe we can talk about how we can change a parent's operating system when it comes to this issue. Our final speaker is Lily Davino, who is also a licensed clinical social worker and the rape crisis coordinator at the Mount Sinai Adolescent Health Center. She's also bilingual and an adjunct professor at CUNY's Hunter College in the Asian American Studies program. Her main areas of expertise include sexual violence, domestic violence, teen relationship abuse, and the health and mental health of adolescents, Asian Pacific Islanders, and immigrants as well. She received the Lydia Martinez Multidisciplinary Collaboration Award for Rape Crisis Professional from the New York City Alliance Against Sexual Assault in March of 2012. She is co-founder and board member of the Kalasugan, did I pronounce that right? Hey, coalition, I'm batting 100. A multidisciplinary collaboration to improve the health of the Filipino community in New York City and New Jersey. She has been an active member of the Asian Pacific Islander Caucus for Public Health with the American Public Health Association and served 2 terms on the caucus's executive committee from 2006 to 2011. She received her MS in social work, her clinical practice from Columbia University, and of social work, and her master's in public health, which by the way is MPH, which seems like miles per hour, right? Am I the only one? She drives fast. Social media sciences, health promotion, disease prevention from the Mailman School of Public Health at Columbia University as well.
So I'm taking a little bit more of a step back and taking a bigger picture. And how I see bullying is sort of in the context of sort of like a continuum or spectrum of violence. A lot of my work is also related to trauma, which overlaps. Also, I think people have been mentioning it. Because where I work at the Adolescent Health Center for Mount Sinai, we do a lot of adolescent-focused work, but we're always engaging family and community. And part of my work isn't doing just clinical work. I definitely work in the primary care clinic where I'm working with other medical staff. I'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later. But I also do a lot of community outreach and professional education on violence. And then in the course that I teach at Hunter, I definitely do a big portion of different types of violence, like hate bias crimes, as well as sexual violence, domestic violence, and what are some of the dynamics, and not just from outsiders, but what is it within the Asian and Pacific Islander community that we're also maybe perpetuating some of these, whether it be stereotypes or creating our own barriers to seeking help. So when I say bullying is part of a continuum of violence, it's also, it can be cumulative and it can escalate. I know we've heard some stories already where there were very isolated and very violent incidents, and I would never discount that, and we have to address those things. But I think when we look at bullying, what's typically happening, it starts from the subtle and actually can build up to more obvious and physical behaviors, including shooting or killing. So how do we catch it too along this, when is it happening? And the sooner we interrupt or intervene, the less of the mental health implications that Deborah reviewed. Also, it's repeated over a period of time and it becomes a pattern. So again, the whole idea of breaking patterns. Deborah really did a great overview of the impact of health and mental health. From someone who does a lot of trauma work, we also want to say, was there previous trauma in this person's life? And how does that shape your perspective, like as the world being safe or not? And even parents, right? Parents have their own lives. Have they actually experienced their own forms of discrimination? Or also coming from traumatic situations. So we also, when we talk to parents, a lot of times the work that I do, I actually see if the parents have had their own experience with violence and how is that shaping how they actually parent, having these conversations with their child. And so how to have a better communication where, let's try to see the world in a safer lens. But we also see, the work that I do also regarding dating violence and also different kinds of violence. What we see sometimes if we don't stop what's happening with the bullying, they can engage in dating violence, sexual harassment, and remember, they're getting older. They're going to become adults. It can continue in college, and remember, there's bullying in workplaces too. So how are we dealing with those things? If they're actually feeling unsafe, even in your workplace. We're talking a lot about schools here. Just go to the next slide. You can sit here. So also one thing, when we're talking about when it's experienced, you want to think about the age. And this is where, you're going to talk to a 10-year-old very differently if you're talking to a 16-year-old, right? The type and origin of trauma. So that's why I want to talk about the different behaviors. Is it going to be more internalized if we're talking about name calling, teasing, versus, a traumatic event where someone's physically hit? Also, and Deborah mentioned last, just like, what's the social supports? What are the reactions of others? I think you guys had mentioned, like, who do you go to, but you don't have someone to go to. And then the frequency, duration, severity, again, that helps us to understand, wow, has it been really ingrained at this point, or is this a one-time deal where we can actually help them, reframe, feel safe again. So that's one part. The next piece. Slide. How are we also helping our youth? Especially I think why I gravitate toward working with adolescents. There's so many services for the little kids, right? But once they hit puberty, everybody runs away, So we work a lot to train people how to talk about also difficult topics. I mean, it is hard once you hit puberty because it brings up really uncomfortable topics about sex, about violence, about substance use. If you can actually talk about these things, we can actually help kids navigate these difficult kind of situations. So they still need our support and guidance. And also think of it as a whole being where it's not just about, their cognition, like if they're academically successful, are they able to socialize? That's really important. Do they have friends? What's their psychological well-being? Are they able to kind of think abstractly and see the bigger picture, as well as how do we take care of ourselves? How do we self-soothe? It's such a basic skill that we forget to teach kids. Some people already talked about barriers to seeking help, and I'm focused here more on adolescence. Confidentiality, right? Even if they went to somebody, are they going to feel comfortable, like you're not going to tell this to everybody? I mean, especially if we're talking about, like, talking about rumors, right? Letting them know the things that are safe to talk about. I know as my role, because I am a man-day reporter as a social worker, I actually still be upfront with them. There's certain things I will have to say something, but it's for your protection too, if someone's hurting you right now. But confidentially, we'll make that venue to also just talk about, things like abuse or bullying. A lot of people have already talked about, language and cultural barriers. Sometimes there is stigmas just to seek help, or are there services for this? I think we see some examples here where you guys are actually creating that service that isn't there, which is awesome. This is the hardest part, the fear of retaliation if I do something though. So how do we actually do some safety planning for them if they do want to say something? Also, think about when you were a teenager, even if you were doing something where you got hurt, but it was after hours, right? And what you're doing it while I was supposed to be studying, but I was actually out with my friends. The teenager will actually be more scared to talk about that versus I got hurt, right? Also, I think we have mentioned already about, how do we actually talk to parents and guardians and other adults? Because again, there may be just distrust of authorities or people older than them too. So I guess, how can we support healthy behaviors, but also are we maybe reinforcing unhealthy behaviors among our youth? So that's the kind of work I try to negotiate between the youth, their parents. The way we work too at the Adolescent Health Center, we also have a lot of different supportive services. So we have a legal advocate. We work with definitely the people who've known about our school, about our clinic. We work a lot with guidance counselors. There are some really great guidance counselors who care about their kids, and again, there's only so much that they can do, but to know where the resource they can go if it's not available at school. We also want to think about what is going on at home, to see if we can help the parents. So some of the things that I was asked to talk about, and it's actually stuff that I talk about in my class, is, again, this is the part where, what is it about, has everyone heard, I hope so, I'll test you, has anyone heard of the model minority myth? Okay, good, thank you. And then when I actually bring this up to my students, and my class is predominantly Asian American, it's amazing how they don't realize this actually was a propaganda piece. It was written by William Peterson in 1966. It was meant to segregate minorities during the Civil Rights Movement. At that time, you think about it, 1966, we have the Immigration Act, the brain drain, so we're flooding in, what looks like these really amazing Asians, right? With engineer degrees, doctors, nurses. That's how I got here, by the way. Well, my parents at least. But there are still a lot of Asian Americans, particularly Chinese American, earlier Filipinos. Even we go further back. There's the history of the coolie trade. Has anyone heard that one? Okay. The coolie trade was particularly with Chinese Americans, Filipinos, Asian Indian, and when slavery got abolished, we were the fill-ins. Okay, Asian Americans filled the gap of slaves. So, are we really that much different than African Americans? And then even then, if you are, like, I was born here, if you can tell with my accent. I'm from Jersey, and I still get to this day, oh, where are you from? I'm like, I'm from New Jersey. And I'm like, no, where are you really from? I'm like, Edison, New Jersey? And I was like, no, where are you really? Like, I'm not giving you my address, okay? So, I learned how to deal with it, obviously. But there's these stereotypes, too, about that. And forget the stereotypes I get as an Asian woman, right? Then there's a backlash, too, of Asian American men as not being less, of a male, right? There's actually historical context of that, too. Most of the Asian males, when they were coming here, the first immigrants, they were relegated to what would be female, jobs, laundry, cooking, right? So demeaning them. So again, it's about this power control. We're actually, and I'm talking about, this idea of oppression, violence, and bullying. I feel falls into this scope of oppression. So, how much of us have fallen into that? I remember days when I was in high school where like, oh my God, I don't want to be that one Asian who's bad at math. Right? Where does that come from, right? It gets ingrained. And then I realized, you know what? I actually really like math. I will say that. I'm good at it. But here I am where like, okay, especially, when I have to explain, oh, Lily, what do you do for a living? I'm a social worker. Like, oh, that's nice, And I feel like, I have to justify, because it's not an MD. It's not, I'm not an engineer. So it's sort of like, so there's that pressure on me to be a sort of Asian, right? So how much then, on the flip side, how much then are other minority groups looking at us very differently because we've been put into this place, which is very unfair? And think about the diversity of the Asian American community. There's so many religions. Even in one country, you're going to have different dialects. You're lumping us all into one place. So when you actually hurt someone because they're Asian American, I forget, like with Vincent Chin, right? They thought he was a different Asian ethnicity, but we all look alike, right? And so that's where how do we kind of break those stereotypes break the stereotypes to the outsiders, but also what are we perpetuating, you know? And then there's definitely even more vulnerable populations. You know, we're talking about the undocumented persons. Even if we have policy, how do they out themselves about, like, you know, like, I don't have status, I could actually get kicked out of here. People with disabilities, right? Much of our work is very able focused. And then, again, one of the ones who experience much bullying and bias crimes are LGBTQ. So I kind of wanted to give more of a bigger perspective and, like, you know, where our history is of these stereotypes. The last piece, which I have here, actually, go back, sorry. And so when I talk about that lens of oppression, we talk about marginalization, also violence and cultural imperialism, talk about also exploitation and powerlessness. I mean, I think there's so many Asian Americans out there who are actually experiencing that. And so bullying, again, is like, where does that fit in, you know, whether it be the subtle pieces or more obvious places. The way we work at the Ellison Health Center from a perspective of, I think people had mentioned, but screening and asking questions. I think I like what you said, Arjat, right? Where if you don't ask, people aren't gonna tell you either, you know? I ask, the questions I have to ask isn't just about bullying. I have to ask, has your partner ever hit you? Has everyone forced you to have sex? I mean, this comes with training, but also we work with a lot of parents and professionals or adults who work with youth to ask these really uncomfortable questions. Because if you're not asking that, how are we teaching kids to also talk about uncomfortable topics? So I'll stop with that. And you know, again, it's a multi-level approach. And I think you have to work with each of your communities to find out what needs to happen, what works for your community. The other part, I think some mentioned, how do we do this consistently and also have checkpoints for ourselves? So we're also continuing the work.
All right, I'm going to get through a real quick round of questioning. So answer me as concisely as you can so that we can get to some of your questions as well. For Wei, I guess I'm curious hearing about your experience for a couple of things. One is, how will you be different as a parent? Right? And it's not to criticize your parents, but what will you be doing differently? The second thing is to organize a boycott of, I presume, largely Asian American students. Like when I was a kid, I would have to either give up a lung or come down with Ebola, and even then I could only get out of school for maybe a day. How was that received when you were trying to get the parents or to get these other Asian students on board with that boycott?
I will start second question. How the
Go for the easy one.
Yes. How to get them to boycott, that was a huge challenge. The first one is, you know, who you are, you know, why you needing me to boycott, right? The first one was challenging, you know, if they trust me. But I wasn't have a big challenge with a Chinese student because the year before the boycott, I was doing a whole bunch, you know, Chinese Student Association stuff and was needing them and bring information back to them, show them I have leadership, and they trust me. And there was a challenge that I reached out to the other language speaking group, Vietnamese student, because, you know, it is, you know, who you are, why are you doing this, why you find me. But when I presenting about, you know, we have a similar issue that the kids, you know, Vietnamese kids also got beat up, and we got beat up too. And then that was just randomly, I sent a text message to them, say, and call them with my poor English, poor Cantonese, and Mandarin mixed together, say, we have a meeting in Chinatown, we're going to have a press conference, and you guys want to join us? And they bring about 10 people. And second day, we agree to bring all people together and start doing the boycott. And for first question, you know, how to be a good parent, you know, there was this is why I'm standing here today. I'm continuing doing youth organizing because my mentor asked me really important question, and he asked me, you know, if your kids ask you, what did you do when you was young? And in that time I couldn't answer anything. Maybe restaurant worker or I see discrimination, but I ignore it. I want to be a role model to my kids. I want to educate them with seeing the society change. I want to let them see how powerful when people get together and how powerful to be an Asian American.
Something tells me you'll make a great parent. Harjun, my question to you was, you talked about the statistic, the stunning statistic of 67%, and then you talked about something else in terms of the amount of bullies we might actually have around us. Would it be useful to encourage that in any surveys in the future, not only asking, have you been bullied, but have you bullied somebody else, or do you have friends who actually are the source of this? And the other question I have for you, you're not done yet. Is there a model, when it comes to reform, is there a model for reform that we see before us with other people who have dealt with this before before now, whether it's lawsuits or whatever? What is the best way to reform the system so that it improves?
I think absolutely. I think these are the kind of questions that you have to be very frank with people. You need to ask, like, if you're being bullied, if you've been bullied, of course we want to provide those resources. We want to help you. But if you're also bullying others, we still want to provide resources and help and both sides of that, right? We're actually drafting a survey. I have no idea what it's really going to end up looking like at the end of it, but what we envision is that it's going to have a list of questions. Have you been bullied? In what form? Verbal, physical, cyber, relational, this, that, and we hope that this will be a little bit surprising. Have you bullied others? Are you aware of this? Or and has action been taken? And then ask the same questions that we would want to know from the other side. So yes, I think absolutely these are important. And I think it's also very important that if you see it, call it out. Not to expect that someone else will necessarily. Don't go attack anyone. Also realize that they may not know. They may be bullying for reasons of, they may feel uncomfortable as well. They may feel that they've been marginalized. They need to justify, like I mentioned before. And these are important things to help alleviate. So to the second question, it's a little, this is such a complicated situation, but at the same time it is somewhat basic, right? Some of the basic steps are talk about it, make it aware, keep talking about it, keep building it up, keep spreading it. I mean, so there's some basic steps that will work in any situation. Now when it comes to more complicated, or now when you get to the complications of it, the example that I gave before, right? School administration didn't do much. So then a lawsuit was filed, and it was, put in the media, it was put in the news, the community, all that. And it was actually, a silver lining of it is a lot of the parents in that entire area really started to realize how serious these things can really become. I mean, imagine, your son coming home then with, key marks between your eyes and almost going blind, things like that. So some parents really started to use that, to become enraged and actually and become vocal about these things and be alert. There was another case, and this was a more positive case for us down in Georgia, and this was much more recent. There was a kid who had been bullied, again, like you were mentioning, it was progressing and progressing. Finally, it came to a point where his nose was broken, and then his parents were like, oh, okay, we need to do something. Essentially what ended up happening was the Department of Justice settlement included a change in their policy, but also included that all students in that district, which is over 100,000 students, so this is down in the South, need to be educated in biases formed after 9/11 attack. So bias-based harassment, bias-based bullying, discrimination, all that. And that was a great policy change. I mean, that was really impactful. Of course, if you look at it from a larger from a larger scale, it doesn't look like it's that big, but 100,000 kids learning about, down in the South, learning about what changed after 9/11 and why, that's huge. But again, what was similar in both situations, whether it was negative or positive, is that people were made aware of it, people started to talk and connect, you brought in the right resources, and something could be done about it. But nothing will happen if we don't really push for it and accept that you really do need to turn over big boulders and rocks to get there.
Nothing like a lawsuit to instigate change in this country. I guess there's a template for that, right? My question for Deborah is, you talk about how parents, it's almost like survival is number one, and then everything else is luxury. Right? How do you change what's the best way to change the way the parent views that. Like, why isn't my kid cooperating? What's the best way to communicate to them that, no, your kid needs your help, you need to change the way you think about it? And yeah, I guess that's my primary question for you. And you already talked about what the signs were, but what is the most often missed signs for parents when their kid is being bullied?
So the first question was about how we can help parents to understand what their children are going through. You know, they do focus they focus a lot on working hard, and they really sometimes cannot understand what mental health is, and you know why their son or daughter is feeling the way that they do. So sometimes I think using analogies is a very good way to help parents to understand. One of my favorite ones is to compare a mental health condition to a physical health condition. Like if you had diabetes, you know, you would go for regular checkup. You would get treatment for it. So same thing with mental health. It's also a part of health. And if somebody is emotionally not healthy or has a mental health condition, and these are the symptoms, then you know we can also, and getting treatment for it is also very important. And the treatment will be different from a physical health condition. Maybe it won't be taking medication or getting surgery. It will be maybe therapy, and I guess in some cases, you know, it would involve medication too. And your second question was?
What's the most often missed sign?
I think one of the most often missed sign is the irritability or the temper. Sometimes the teens have a lot of pent up hurt feelings, and they're feeling really unhappy, and they don't really have an outlet to talk about it. So you might see that they might be a little bit more grumpy. They might have a bad temper. So the parents would notice, why is he or she like, being so mean, or being so short with me? Every time I ask them a question, you know, they would become angry with me. They don't want to talk to me. So this can be perceived as bad behavior, being oppositional or being disrespectful, but instead they might miss that underneath that they might be having a lot of emotional struggle.
I have a question for Lily, but before I get to her, who's got a question for the panel?
Is there a place, I know you have to get the school to even acknowledge that something is going on, but a place for training high schoolers to be allies and not just be bystanders?
To clarify the question, if there are trainings available and where they're made available for high school students to take action and not just be bystanders?
Or if that's being envisioned.
Or if that's being envisioned. Okay. So I can't speak for all organizations, but of the ones I know and the one that we work with, yes, absolutely. So as an example, from our youth program, right, the Junior Sec Coalition, whose name is very creative. What they do is that they facilitate anti-bullying workshops to other youth, and this is one of those. The idea is that youth can listen to other youth. Youth will listen to other youth better than they will to other adults, professionals, people they don't know as well, right? And they have better ins with them, of course. They're their own peers. So they go and they talk to the students and they say that, you know, and they make very real life kind of examples. Like, you know, if someone's picking on you, if someone's saying something to you and you see another kid walk by, you know, how mad are you going to be that that person didn't even say anything? They didn't even stick up for you, right? So, and we really try to make those feelings come alive in these sessions, in these like 1 hour long trainings. And the hope is that even if it's one situation that comes up later, right, maybe they'll double think. They'll say, maybe I should say something, right? I remember how I felt. And that's the idea. We can't say that it's going to be a perfect, perfect training. Everyone's going to come out like awesome, you know, no one's going to be bystander again. But, you know, you keep doing these, you keep repeating these actions and these efforts, and something will start to slowly change. High schools, they also, a lot of times what happens when you report bullying incidents, some officials and some forums actually ask, did anyone witness this incident? And then what will happen is that what we've heard, some youth actually say that once they were called in by the principal to talk about it and then asked, did you take any action, or why not, or what happened and whatnot, they feel a sense of shame and guilt. And that usually actually ends up being a positive thing if anything happens in the future, that they will take action because they don't want to feel those things again. So those are a few examples. But yes, there are definitely, and even if you do a quick Google search, you'll find plenty.
Thank you. My question is, I think the description for this event said that the bullying increased by 23%. Does anyone have theories about why this is happening? Is it because the immigrant population is the fastest growing? Is this why we're seeing the spike? Part two is why do you think the educators in the school ignored you? I mean, did they feel like you were, or Asian Americans as a group, was easier to bully? I mean, I can understand why kids bully each other, but I mean, the educators.
There are two factors that definitely play into this, and I'm sure others. One is that at the time that the first report or the first survey was taken, that's when actually bullying started to also come into the spotlight, especially nationally and at a local level. When the second survey was administered, a lot of kids at that time were more aware of the different forms of bullying and started recognizing that they have been bullied or others being bullied. So the reporting increased, but then the other thing that we found out, and this wasn't really included in the report because we couldn't really support it quantitatively, was that even though reporting may seem between those two surveys that it increased and that thereby bullying increased, we also found that bullying increased more than just that margin, and reporting decreased. So there's an even larger margin that we can prove, but we can say at least for a fact, it's at least 23%. If that makes sense. I'm not sure if that was clear enough. But yeah, and then
I guess I want to answer the little bit about first question. For Philadelphia situation, the budget cut is a big one, affects what happened to the school safety. And Philadelphia school does not have the safety manager now, does not have the assistant principal now, and they cutting half of security in the school now, and there's not enough counselor, and sometimes there's whole school only 2 counselors with 800 kids on the school. Yes, and then there's not enough resource, of course, right? And then for the Asian kids, for those immigrant kids, right, they have a language barrier, as you mentioned before, right? There's only one, the bilingual counselor in the school only once a week. And how can they report stuff to them? It's really challenging. And this is the Philadelphia situation. And why teacher is not ignore the incident, right? There's a couple. The first one was, there was a culture in the school. There was a culture in the school that people bullying each other, and principal does not care why I should be the one who stand up to care. Right? I'm not saying all teachers in the school, right? Some teachers are really active trying to change the school environment, but that was shutting down by principal. And principal was feel why you are the one talk about this, right?
You're saying it was so common that they didn't care?
Yeah, that was overcommon that they don't care, and second, there was about budget in the Philadelphia system. Right, teacher for now, teacher may not have a contract in next school year. So think about this: if your job going to lose, are you gonna care more about their kids, other people's kids? I don't think so. Right, this is a problem in the Philadelphia level with the state level now, and even some teacher, and the other reason why some teacher ignore it, because some teachers are registered. They are registered. They're doing stuff to Asian students. I remember there was one staff in the school, just called one Asian, one Chinese student say, hey, Dragon Ball. Well, hey, Chinese, right? And sometimes even though there's a staff say, going back to your country. If you don't speak it, order food with English. I remember someone said it to me. I say, because I couldn't pronounce what is that, right? I said that. They just pretend your accents, and when other kids saw it, I feel, yeah, my teacher do it. Why I can't do it? Right?
I think Harjot, you spoke a little bit about. I was wondering about how can cyberbullying be more harmful than physical bullying? For many reasons. One is that cyberbullying, it doesn't get deleted, right? You can't, like, if a fight happens, physical fight, you know, of course you're still mentally scarred by it, but the physical fight is not necessarily put on a videotape that you can keep watching and other people can keep watching and then other people can keep bringing it up, et cetera, et cetera. This is very, very true for bullying incidents, and I'm steering away from bias-based, of course, here. But bullying incidents like slut shaming, right, that happens a lot. That's one of the biggest ones that we've seen for sure. And also, actually, when students bully other students, they encounter cyberbullying and they want to take it back, they can't, right? If they say something to another student, a racist comment, whatnot, you can't erase that comment. You can't take the post down necessarily, or even if you can, you don't know who took a screenshot. You don't know who has it saved and logged. That's one of the biggest things. It haunts you. Second is that you don't know who saw it. You have no control over it the second it goes virtual. Third would also be is that you can't face it and address it in very much the same way that you would if you're face-to-face somebody, or if it's like an exclusion thing, if there's gossip and rumors. Even with rumors, you can still address it more organically than you can through Facebook. I mean, and then another thing is that it also raises, you see a comment, you see this, you see whatever, you have time to think about what your action may be, and at the same time, you feel like you don't because you may be in a race with the other people who may be seeing it or whatnot, so you may want to retaliate even quicker. Or you may want to, or maybe that starts to build up, and at a later point, you may do something way worse, right? Retaliate much harder than you would otherwise. So there are a lot of things that play into here, but definitely that you have no control, you don't know what's going on, and it's just going to stay with you.
I'd just like to add the other thing about cyberbullying is that it's scalable. Like, people can repost, people can copy and paste from other things, and they might not know the true story behind it or where it comes from, whether it's true or not. But the ripple effect does incrementally increase a lot quicker. And that being said, what are some mental effects on people who see folks of the same ethnicity being bullied but not doing anything? Like, what are some effects of the bystander? Like, pertaining to like the cycle of bullying, or just being someone who's seen it but didn't do something?
You mean in the same group, so you mean like if an Asian's to bully an Asian, you mean that sense?
Oh, like meaning someone who is Asian is being bullied, and I am Asian, and I just saw that, and I just walked away. And whether that the nature of that harassment is based on race, or based on something that I relate to as well.
So one of the things you made me think of is this vicarious experience too. So there is a lot of literature on the vicarious experience of whether it be violence or on witnessing, violence, including things like, bullying. So yeah, I think if you're seeing someone who looks like you, and that could be again because of just how with similar looks, or again people generalizing anyway, it's similar to what Deborah was talking about. I think it's just another message about my identity. I'm Asian, everyone thinks of me the same way. I think it has that same impact if they were also being directly harassed. Another piece with the bystander is, I think there's a lot of work actually trying to build bystander involvement, whether it be supportive or saying something, But you bring up a good point. Given the populations I work with, I can't imagine the amount of vicarious and witnessing of community violence, right? But let's say about where I live, And we also want to think about that not just with against race or ethnicity, but if you're living in a community where there's a lot of violence anyway, I think it just adds one more layer. How to be safe too.
So how can a mentoring organization like Big Brothers Big Sisters empower and support our volunteers when they're going to have these conversations with their mentees about bullying, especially like cyberbullying, which is something that most of our volunteers didn't go through, right? This is a pretty new phenomenon, so I guess how can we best equip them to handle these discussions?
Some of this is a little bit of trial and error because a lot of this depends on the personalities of the volunteers and also the mentees and their relationships. One thing that I think I have found is to allow the mentees to really speak the most, like ask them the questions, especially if you're saying the volunteers have not gone through cyberbullying so much themselves, right? So then to be very real about it, like, hey, I didn't have this, so you tell me about it. Let me learn from you, right? And then what ends up happening is that like they start as if it's not their story almost, right? So they feel a little bit more comfortable in sharing it, and all of a sudden it becomes a way for them to to share their experience, share their feelings, and then it just, takes off from there. Another thing that sometimes works, and I don't know if this would work in your structure though, is to have a few of them together. So a few mentees, a few volunteers, and to kind of do like a small group kind of discussion. But definitely whenever it comes to anything with cyberbullying, because the thing with the cyberbullying is that almost always not almost always, but a lot of times in the beginning, a lot of facts, a lot of the context is hidden. It takes a little bit of repetition, it takes a little bit of pushing to really get the whole story. So a lot of times kids will talk about how they were bullied and they'll say like, oh yeah, he picked on me, he did this, he did that. And then you don't know that maybe that kid had also started something before that. And of course they don't want to mention it, they don't want to admit it. And then it's just to always keep things as real and relatable as possible. Like, it has to always be real. Like talking large scale, like, okay, well, these are the impacts of bullying. This is this. To really get into large scale stuff, it's not going to resonate, especially with younger youth. They just want to know, what do you want me to do? What can I do? Tell me what to do, and then take it from there. And then they'll learn what the large scale means and all those complex factors. But that's what I would say.
I think this goes to also with any agency, what does your community need, and keeping up to date with trainings and in-services. We work with, and we do a lot of different services at the Allison Health Center, where I train researchers because they're actually asking a lot of questions about violence, and not only their own personal experience of actually asking those questions, but having a knowledge base of what is different types of harassment, or so they also understand why maybe a person's acting the way they are. We actually work with also peer educators. So the way we train our peer educators is twofold. We're actually training them so they get the information for themselves, because they range from like late teens to early 20s. So they may be going through some stuff too, and if they're going to be working with the other youth, how do they handle their own stuff and helping them to support this youth who's going through the same thing. So I think, especially when you're talking about mentors and mentees, you want to make sure that I go back to this, like, how are we supporting our staff, right? How are we supporting the people who have to deal with these really sensitive things? So I was talking to somebody on the elevator earlier, and I guess with cyberbullying, it's one of those things. It's really important to keep up to date, because things are changing seriously. In comparison to decades ago, they change monthly, But I think asking them, when we can ask the different questions, then asking what's the venue, what's the mechanism that this is happening, then you can really be in touch with the youth.
We've been thinking a lot about in our group about community lately, and if it's true that they listen to their peers much better than others, then what you did to organize student government becomes that much more crucial, right? We can try to affect change from the outside, and even government has its obligations, but as you saw with the school system in Philadelphia, sometimes that falls short. But when you establish communities, and it's not just about friendships, then you can affect change a different way, and maybe that's a way to go forward on this and really concentrate on it, because as adults, there's only, we're less effective, right?
One of the things that came up as I was we were planning this panel was the same common theme of this importance of sharing our stories. So something that's very tangible and concrete and simple is this idea of how do we destigmatize talking about the bullying experience, right? There's so much shame wrapped around it, right? It's, it's me, I'm unlikable, I did something to sort of deserve this bullying behavior, whereas a lot of it comes from the fact that we are Asian Americans, and they are these stereotypes, the model minority myth, the perpetual foreigner, where are you from? That always feeds into, I think, some of this bullying experience that our youth experience. So
I think the really important thing that sort of kind of underlies all of this is the fact is encouraging our youth to tell their stories and let them know that they're not alone. And then so this like coalition building, organizing can happen from being able to share our experience and seeing that we're not alone. So I really thank all our panelists for coming and sharing their experiences with us. And I thank Arthur for doing a really great job moderating and asking really good questions. And I know that we didn't get maybe the chance for everybody to ask questions, but they will be around for a little bit if you want to talk to them. But just in the context of continuing the conversation, I think what I was kind of listening to, I was like, wow, I think we're trying to pack in so much in an hour and a half. We're talking about, systems of oppression. We're talking about, addressing mental health, and there's just so much. So obviously, these are kind of conversations that need to continue. So please grab resources. There's organizational lit out there from these organizations that our panelists are from that talk about these sort of youth education and mental health services that are available. In your program, there was a little insert with specifically mental health and anti-bullying resources available to students and parents and community organizations. So please don't toss that. We put it all together from talking to other community organizations, and we'll be posting all of this on our website sometime soon. And we are going to be continuing this conversation. Another conversation that we plan to have in the fall is one on microaggression. So this implicit sort of invisible racism that happens to us as adults all the time, and which is of course certainly happening to our youth, right? So it's not the physical sort of bullying that you can identify, it's not necessarily the cyberbullying that you can target, but it's really sort of this invisible, that made me feel really uncomfortable. For some reason I feel really devalued or undermined. So you've probably been seeing that a lot on just current events like microaggression. So we are going to be organizing a panel in the fall, so please sign up for our newsletter, visit our website to keep posted on when that's happening. We're going to gather a great panelists, line up a panelist talking about sort of invisible sort of racism that affects our youth and their mental health. I will be distributing a survey to all those who came today. I really do want to hear your feedback as to what your needs are, what the community needs are, the youth that you work with, so that we can organize more events that really do support our youth. And I was really hoping to see students out here today, but we all do look kind of young, but I don't think anyone's actually a student. So at the next panel, if you do work with youth, please have them come out, because having them hear these conversations are really important. Not for them to go to college and wait so many years, like, oh, I'm not crazy. Like, this does actually exist, and I think it's really important for them to hear from adults who've experienced this, that they're not alone, and there are ways that they can advocate for themselves and not just be helpless. So please subscribe. A few ways that you can connect with us is on our website, on Facebook, also on Twitter, although we're not as active, but we will be. So please connect us and tag us so that we can have this conversation online and continue it. Thank you so very much.